Hey guys, I'm glad to be back. I'm sorry I started a little later than I normally would. I had things I take care of like earlier through the day, but I'm here. I wanted to kind of drop in here before it got too late. But I am gonna still come in and do a little streaming, so it's actually gonna be my drawtober drawing for today. So what I'm gonna be doing, so just to catch up to speed for those of you who've been watching me on like Instagram, BlueSky. Hey animator, hey, glad you dropped in. Good to see you. So for those of you who have been kind of watching my stream, I've been doing a lot of my Drawtober stuff. So I've been doing a lot of stuff for all this muscle. So far I'm at day 10. So just catch up to speed. For those of you who haven't been here before, so here's day 1, cosplay. Day 2 I did boa. Day 3 I did beard. Day 4 I did detective, and here I did my friend Spiffy's character's Rowan as a detective. I did him. Day 5, hang on. Day 5 was distracted. Day 6 was sumo. Day 7 was crowded. Day 8 was pause. Hey, Shay, glad to see you. This Friday in Ocean Procreate. Oh, nice. I'll have to check that out once I'm done with this. I'll check and see how that turned out. Day 8, it was pause. Day 9, it was makeup. And of course, yesterday, that was the most recent. This is probably my favorite I've done so far was Alien. So I did one with Zoidberg. So for today, I'm actually gonna do one. It's actually one I started a sketch on earlier today called Fat Cats. So I figured I'd do one with 2 particular Fat Cats from Disney. One for Rescue Rangers, Fat Cat from Rescue Rangers, and also P. Also like Disney like flagship Fat Cat. So you see, I already started with kind of a loose like light sketch that I've already started refining. So what I'm gonna do is actually kind of start going over the sketch and kind of refining everything. So let me start with Pete here. So let me kind of refine some of his more like scruffy hairs, because Pete's more of kind of a scruffy, like more gruff type of character. So let me get his eyes. Let me get his his little muzzle here, because he's got a very short, very small muzzle here. And for his eyes, you see his eyes kind of bend at an angle a bit. Let me get, his mouth, his teeth. I'm trying to see how I want to do his teeth, though, because I know in some versions, like, he has, like gaps in between. In fact, let me look up and see what type of gap, because I know in some versions he has a full set of teeth, other times he doesn't. I might do him on, like he does in Goofy, because I know in a Goofy movie kind of has, like, a noticeable gap in between his teeth. So I'm thinking that's kind of what I want to do here. Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and do that. Yeah, I'll do that. So I'm going to do that. Let me kind of bring out his little bottom lip. Let me kind of bring out his side of his head, because, he's got a pretty massive head. Let me get the scruffiness a bit more here. And I figure I'd draw them here kind of doing more like a fist pump type of deal. Because I figure, with him, they kind of like burst on Disney afternoon on the same time, because, like Fat Cat, he came on like 89 to 1990. He was voiced by Jim Cummings, and of course, like Goof Troop came out like just a few years later, and he ended up being voiced by Jim Cummings. So I figured it'd be nice to kind of do like a character where both of these guys had like the same voice actor, and they both have that connection. So I think it'd be nice to kind of do one with both of them together. And also, so I feel I'll draw both of them with little fists here. Let me get the collar of his shirt. Let me get the sleeves. Let me get his arm. Let me get his little gut. Let me get his bottom area here. Yeah, I'm sorry I started a little later than I normally would because I had a few things I had to kind of take care of. You know, I have errands, but also I'll spend time with family. Because, of course, we went out for brunch and we did that. And we did a couple things afterwards. So, got back here a little later than I expected, but we had a great time. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So, now I'm going to do Fat Pat next. So, let me see a couple of reference photos. Just to make sure he looks on pretty good. Even though I'm not too concerned about keeping it completely on mono. Yeah, and I figured I'd have him kind of like leaning down, like he's kind of leaning down to his height, since obviously for those who've seen the show, you know, the guy has a much smaller character, even though has a pretty big personality. He's size-wise, he's still pretty small. I think here, make sure I get his little mustache because he's got that very curly mustache. Let me get his little head. Let me get his eyes while we're at it. Let's get little eyebrows. Get the top of that. Let's get his ears here. And it's kind of got a little bit of kind of like tufts, like slicked down hair on the side. These like 3 small tufts of hair that are slicked down. So let me get that. And it's kind of a little scruffy on the side because usually like Pete, where his hair is pretty ragged. His is a little more prim and proper, which suits his personality because he's always been more like a prim and proper type of guy. For those who've seen the show. I think I'll have a hand on his hip rather on behind his neck. Let me get that. Let me get the sleeves of his suit or of his blazer. Of course, let's get his little vest. Cause like Pete, he's known for being very like sharply dressed. And I've been meaning to kind of like do a picture like these two together for the longest time. And I figured now, will be kind of a perfect time to kind of really do it. And over, I am planning on coloring this in kind of later on, since this is pretty much going to be my Drawtober entry for today. But I hope you guys have really been doing pretty well. I meant to start a little early today, but a few things came up, but I'm here, so I'm glad to be back. Let me kind of get, his little feet here. In fact, let me bring his legs down a bit more. Let's see. Let me see if there's anything else I need to add. Let me get. I'll just make sure I have everything I need. Okay, let me get his tail, too. I need to figure out get his tail somehow. Let me add his tail. I know in other versions I've seen it kind of bends up. I think I'll have it bend down here so you guys can see it a little bit better. In fact, let me make sure the camera's in focus to see. Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was out of focus like that. There we go. Alright, so now you guys can probably see it just a bit more. Alright, that looks good. So now that we got these two together with our main sketch, let me get like, I think I'll go get like a pen so I can start refining our outline. So give me just one moment. Alright, here we go. So, now I got our pen, let me just start with our black pen here. So I'm just gonna start, with Pete's muzzle here. Oh, am I running out of ink? Oh, here we go, perfect. Yeah, so I gotta check to make sure, I still have a good amount of ink before I start. So hey, I'll start with the kind of muzzle here, kind of around the side of his face. Let me come down and come around for his muzzle here. I come down because he's got a very big smile, because he's got a very big personality. Let me get his teeth. That's pretty good. Let me kind of get, his eyes, his menacing, evil eyes. Well, depending on what version of Pete you get, because you got some version of Pete where he's definitely a bad guy. But then you got some where he's really more of a bully and a pest rather than, say, a full-on villain. Like I know in Goof Troop, I think that was kind of the first times where you saw Pete more, as more kind of like a pest and more a bully, where he can actually be a full-on villain like he could be like in the past. Let me current a gap in his teeth, because I know in the movie, Goofy movie, he had like kind of a gap in his teeth. I think I'll get here. Let me kind of get the edge around his gloves. We gotta get his little bent finger, because I figure I have to draw them kind of giving like a little pencil, because I figure like these two, since these are guys that can tend to be pretty full of themselves, and I figured these were guys that probably get along pretty well. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. I think I get a little cuff. I'm not gonna draw a bridge. I just want to kind of get around the fist here just to make sure at least that fist bump actually looks alright. Let me kind of get along his little arm here. On the side, I'm gonna add a little bit of tufts of hair around where his elbow normally is. And normally you're not really gonna see his elbow since he's got a lot of hair. Yeah, usually if you're drawing like anthropomorphic animals like these guys, if they got elbows, you're not really gonna see them that often, because usually like that hair is gonna cover up the area where their joints are. So he gets his little shoulders. Let me get the collar of his shirt. Let me get the other side of his collar here. Let me get this like little area down in the middle of his shirt. Maybe I'll add a couple of his buttons. Of course, I'll add his gut, since he's a pretty big guy. And let me see. Let me check on something for a brief moment. Alright, here we go. Let me get some of his shorts. Let me get the back of his foot here. Let me get his other foot here, because he's got fairly small feet. Yeah, okay, so now that I got him good, looking good, let me actually kind of shade in his little nose while I'm at it. I'll color his fur later on too, once I get around to it. And I actually have a lot more planned on this evening. I know after I'm done with this stream, I'll be out to a show probably like later on, you know, this evening, probably around like 8:30. So I wanted to make sure I came through here before it got a little bit too late. Because I wanted to get a chance to kind of at least see you guys, get a chance to stream. And so I've really been enjoying how like Draw Troop has run so far, because like I hadn't expected, you know, the first one I made to take a lot more time than I would, but I wanted to kind of like, since I'm doing Draw Troop, since I don't have to say like stick to just using like pen and ink all the time, I realized that, oh, I can use pencil, I can use markers, I can use pastels, and when I don't actually stick with just one medium. Yeah, his little eyebrows. I'll make them a little thicker here, because I know on the show, Fat Cat tended to have pretty thin eyebrows. But every now and then they would give him like thicker ones, which I kind of like more too, because at least on times if he needed to get a little more expressive, I think it worked, you know, and it worked a lot for him. And of course, he got a very pronounced jawline. Because, you know, with him, he kind of has more like an aristocrat, like or almost mobster like appearance for him. Let me kind of get his little arms here. Of course, he got very massive arms. And of course, you know, there were tunes where they got like 4 fingers rather than say 5. Let me get the collars of, you know, the lapels of his suit jacket. And let me see, give me just one moment. Let me get the other side as well. Let me kind of bring it down, bring it out of it, just fan it out just a bit. Let me get the other side of his shoulder here too. Make sure that looks good. I thought about adding some other like Disney cat series. I thought maybe adding like Cheshire Cat. I think what other famous cat you check out, maybe Lucifer, and those are others like famous Disney cats as well. But I figured I'd just stick with these two, you know, just keep it simple. I might do another like picture later on down the line where I'll probably do with other Disney cats like all together. But I figured with these two, I want to keep it with these two, just keep it simple. But also, like, since both of these guys kind of the same voice actor too, I figured it'd be a lot more fun to kind of do it this way. So let me get his little vest. Of course, let's get his little tie. Let me get his little belly here. Hey, let me bring his coat out back just past his arm here. And let me kind of bring his tail out a bit more here too. Let me add a little bit of scruffs at the edges, just to add a little bit more character to it, because that's the thing with his design. He really wasn't too, since his character was very kind of prim and kind of proper type deal, he really didn't have too much of a scruffiness in his design. But also, he was a house cat too, so you have that going on as well. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I think now what I am going to do now is that now that I've kind of got our outline, let's kind of start coloring everything in. So I know with him, his inside of his shirt tend to be kind of like a dark gray, almost black color. And he had like a gray shirt underneath here, so let me get a little bit underneath his underneath the collar, you know, of his blazer. I think I'll add a little, make sure I get a little bit of outline of his suit jacket here. Yeah, a little bit of curve here for the strength of his slick down hair. Let me get his nostrils. I'm gonna shade in just his nose a bit, not too much. I want it to be kind of nice gray because even though I had a dark nose, it wasn't like completely black. You know, let me get his little handlebar mustache, his little thin mustache. And for him, of course, for Pete, of course, you know, since he has complete black fur, I'm gonna color his areas a full dark. Do that. I'm gonna color in, you know, his fur down here too. And since I feel like I wouldn't have much time, I want to kind of get the sketch out of the way like early on, so that way I can get right to the fun part, you know, which is really like coloring it in. And if some of you probably heard me mention on either on BlueSky or DeviantArt, part of it is I decided to go Drawtober again. Now I'm hearing, you know, with Inktober, apparently like the heads up, you know, like the main heads behind Inktober, to basically kind of change it up now where they're trying to go more corporate, you know, with the Inktober challenge. So now this ain't the gospel. From what I've heard is that apparently if you do end up doing it with Inktober, they might end up taking credit for it if you like hashtag like Inktober. If you do it like under their challenge, so of course, you know, now a lot more people kind of doing like their own, like some are doing Drawtober like I'm doing, some are doing Cattober, some are doing like Ink, some people are doing I think Markertober. I think I saw one who do Cattober, so another one do Monstertober, where they theme around like certain things that they draw or want to draw. And this isn't my first time doing this too. I actually did this same thing like a while back in 2020. Actually, yeah, back in 2020, I think because that was around the same time. I think the main guy, I think Jake Park, who started the whole thing, he was under contract for copying Alfonso Dunn's ink drawing tutorial book, because apparently, you know, his he had released his own drawing book, but a lot of the examples, they were almost identical to on the one Alfonso Dunn did. And I actually looked at what the video did, and they were pretty much almost identical. And fun enough, it actually made me. It was kind of disappointing, but also actually made me want to go and get Alfonso Dunn stuff, because, you know, Alfonso Dunn, you know, like I've been watching him for a good while, and I feel, you know, I feel he was kind of a big influence, you know, as far as helping me getting comfortable like working, you know, with like pen and ink, you know, as a medium, because he really knows how to explain things in a way that's really simple, you know, and easy for folks to learn. Let me get the bottom of it, you know, his like sandal-like shoes. Let me kind of get the bottom of his feet here. Let me kind of bring out the bottom part of his sandals a bit more here, so a little more pronounced. Kind of shade underneath, you know, the collar of his shirt. Let me bring that out just a bit more. Let me kind of thicken up the outlines on the edges a bit here. Let me kind of add more of those little tufts. And, you know, of course, I'm probably kind of smooth things out a little bit more later on down the line as I start adding more like colors to this. Okay, so that looks good. So I think next I'll probably move on to say his suit here. I know he has like a dark blue, almost like purplish suit. So I'll start by coloring that in. You see, I'm starting with just one direction where I'm just going one direction with a nice solid layer of color. I'm probably going to cross it later on just to give it, make it look a bit more uniform. Looks pretty good. Of course, I'm gonna go across in the other direction. I always like to cross that when I'm getting a nice solid layer because I feel like visually it looks a lot more neater, it's a lot cleaner. Yeah, let me kind of bring out the outline for his arms a bit more. Parts of his jacket. Because I don't want those lines we made to get lost in all of our cross work. I think I'll use the color a little bit on his nose, because I know his nose kind of like a bluish, purplish tint to it. And actually, I think I'll keep this fairly light because I know the inside of the shirt, it was more like a dark, like royal blue. Because this was more had a purplish tint to it. So of course, I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm actually going to make sure this is actually looks a little bit darker, has a more of a stark contrast compared to, say, you know, his like purplish suit. Because I'm probably going to like some red to just kind of really lighten the whole thing up just a bit. Alright, now I'll go back with a little bit of red. So of course, let me kind of get his tie. And of course, we know red's kind of a power color too. I'll use a little bit of sky. I know I think Goofy Boy, its color was more like an orangish color, but I think I'll still use it like red here. I'll just add a little orange later on, just to kind of like really make his shirt pop a bit more. Alright, so let me use my other one while I'm at it. Let me use this kind of coloring, you know, like peach shirt. Because since he had like a light blue, like sea blue shirt, I'm going to use this for that. There we go. Let me go a little bit further down. Oh, I almost forgot. I almost forgot his shoulder. I almost forgot that fast. That was sometimes if you work on one area for a long time, you'll forget other areas too, so it tends to happen. Oh, Spiffy! I didn't realize you joined. Midtjylland for Divorce or Rowan loves Pete, its favorite character ever. Oh, wow! I'm gonna say right now. Oh, great! That's really good. I'm glad you're able to join. Yeah, Pete. When it comes to Disney characters, Pete's probably one of my top favorite characters. And also help with him being a villain character. He's so versatile too, because he can be a villain, he can just be a bully, he can be a pest, but sometimes he can be an ally, he can be a friend. And I like that versatility, but I think it helps, with him technically being one of Disney's oldest character, because apparently he's been around. He's been around longer than Mickey Mouse has had. I think his very first appearance was back in the early days. They did videos based on character. I think it was Alice, based on Alice in Wonderland. Because before they did the movie Alice in Wonderland, they had a series of cartoons they did, with like Alice with a live action, but she would interact with cartoons. And one character she would interact with, one was Pete. Now in that version, he was a dog. But like over the years, like they made more a cat character. And weirdly enough, with him, it's like his speech tends to go back and forth. Because in some versions he's a dog, other versions he's a cat. I think more recent versions nowadays he tends to be more like a cat now. Because the funny thing is he doesn't really like lean those cat-like qualities. But I think it was one I think there was one thing where I forgot what name of the cartoon, but it was one I think where Mickey was stowing away on a train, and Pete was kind of like an usher. He was like a bus boy, and he was checking everybody for tickets. Of course, he finds Mickey, and at one point, try to scare Mickey. Tell the story, how he had to kick this big cat on a train, and he ends up revealing that it's him by like a one big meow. And it's funny because this is one of the few times like he kind of really leans into those cat-like tendencies, because we don't see him really do it that often. But the same way, like a lot of like the flagship characters, they don't really lean it, because like Mickey and Minnie, of course, they usually don't act like mice do. Like Goofy. I keep hearing I know some people say it's a dog, other people say it's a cow. I can't help but think he's probably a cow, because of course I know like sometimes he have a crush on Clarabelle Cow. I don't know, but that's the kind of weird thing with those characters. They tend to be kind of like ambiguous as far as species goes. I like to think he's probably maybe a cow dog hybrid, because of course then you got Pluto, who actually is a dog. But thing is, he's not bipedal like the others. He actually walks on fours like a real dog. So let me kind of go over this, just some more, but kind of like add a little more of that light blue to his shirt here. Trying to think. Okay, even though I know his fur is really more on the gray side, it does have more of like that bluish tint. So I'm gonna do a light layer of that blue from this pen here. Just gonna take a very light layer, and I might go over it probably with some gray down the line. And you see I'm being very light, I'm very not heavy-handed at all. Because I know in the show, even though his fur was gray, it kind of had like a bluish, like periwinkle tint to it. So that's why I kind of really hesitated on actually doing it right away, because I didn't want to be too heavy-handed with it. But also, I kind of want to see how it looked on Superverse before I started to use it on his fur. It's weird because in Goof Troop, he doesn't really have fur on his arms. Yeah, and honestly, I think at this point he's not really a dog. I think he's probably more like a cat than he is a dog now. And a weird thing with Goof Troop, I think with Goof Troop, basically what they did for that show, and not with Goofy 2, they modeled him more on how he looked in the 50s. Because in the 50s, he kind of had a design like that, where he had more like he had a little bit more flesh around, like his arms and legs. Versus when we went more to classic, what he has now, where it's furry all over. And even the 50s, like Goofy had that hepatite deal to where he had more like fleshy arms. Like, let me forget to get the color in his like suit on it. So I forgot to get that. Yeah, it is original design choice, and funny enough, I do recall these one or two episodes I think where they forgot to color in the flesh the flesh getting the right color, so he ended up looking like he had fur all over his arms like he does like in more future adaptions. And honestly, I think when it comes to P, I think probably my favorite adaptation, it definitely, aside from a Goofy movie, definitely Goof Troop. And granted, I'm biased because, you know, like, that's the first time Jim Cummings would voice P. And, you know, of course, he's been doing him ever since then. It's why I've ever seen, oh yeah, you know, his Steven was iconic. His black and white look is the most dog-like in opinion. And I had kind of snout, it's furry, and it's not fleshy. Yeah, I definitely do agree. But I could have sworn it was a cat in that one too. But then again, it's been a while since I've seen it. But also, I think in that one, in those old shorts, he has a noticeable tail too. Yeah, but I always like to say, you know, with like the flagship Disney characters, like aside from like say like Minnie, say from like Minnie and Mickey and Donald and Pluto, like all the other guys kind of tend to be kind of like more like ambiguous as far as species go. Let me kind of color around his tail just a bit more. And speaking of Goofy movie, like that was honestly one of the very first movies I had ever watched, you know, as a kid. Because I remember, because I didn't see it in theaters, because I didn't see it. I remember we had it on VHS, we had it on videotape. And I remember it was one of the few I used to always like to watch. Because for some reason I had a really short attention span back then when it came to movies. I know we didn't like, in fact, let me use purple for here. I know we didn't like watching movies like that often. I used for TV shows, but anytime Goofy movie came on, it would always have my full attention. And I need to check out new documentaries. Apparently, they did a documentary not too long ago talking about the making of the movie. How apparently it kind of had a pretty big production because it was so different from a lot of other like Disney films that came out at the time because it wasn't a big blockbuster like say like Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and Lion King. So it wasn't any like the big like blockbusters Disney was doing at that time. It was a very small, more of a low-key type of movie, but it had a lot of heart. And funny enough, because even though it didn't really do all that well, you know, at the box office, you know, it's since had become like a big like cult classic, and rightfully so. Cause I mean, like even though it's not a big block like those others, like it's still got a heart. You know, it's funny. During the songs are memorable. I think I came out TikTok not too long ago. I think it was a show from a while back where Goofy's voice actor Bill Farmer did the duet with Max's voice actor Jason Marsden, where they did the open road. Which funny enough, I think I heard that in the actual movie, I think they had a different guy to do a lot of Max's songs. I think Jason Marsden did the speaking voice, but I don't think he normally didn't sing. What did it say? One of the first movies I watched was Jaws and SpongeBob. Oh, so you're definitely showing your age here because I remember seeing SpongeBob in theaters, and it's been years I've seen Jaws. I had so many takes growing up. So shame that Blockbuster. Oh yeah, Blockbuster. I remember Blockbuster. I think Hollywood's Video. That was another one. Yeah, I remember back in the days. You know, I think on weekends, you know, our family, we would go to a because we used to have a Blockbuster over near Kroger, like near where we used to live, and we would go then we would rent and we rent different videotapes. I remember I used to rent Fantasia. That was one I used to rent a lot. Goofy Movie, that was another one. The various Tom and Jerry tapes, I used to rent those a lot. I used to like renting those. We used to rent Twister. That was because of course I used to like the disaster films. Still kind of do. I used to like those type of movies. Okay, before I go to pump, let me see if there's anything else I can do, you know, with these pens before I move on to the next thing. Let me see. I think I'm probably good here if I move on to the next thing. Yeah, I think I'm a good next thing, so I'm gonna move on to the next thing. Oh yeah, his eyes. Yeah, his pupils kind of have irises, kind of like green eye. Pupils are kind of green, so let me color those in. Yeah, that was something pretty special, you know, about going to a movie theater, to Blockbuster kind of rent movie you wanted to go see. But of course, back in the day, of course, in the day when it came with like just catching was on video, you had to kind of wait almost a year before. Well, I think I take it back. You had to wait almost 6 months to maybe a year before it came out on VHS, and you might have had to wait even longer, before it ended on television. And especially in Disney case, because with Disney, they had up for the longest time when it came to putting their movies on VHS, and especially on TV. In fact, cameras, let me get my pencil because I'm gonna start coloring this in with pencil just a moment. Because the thing with Disney is that they really didn't want people to watch their movies on TV or on VHS, because they felt at the time that if they started putting their movies on VHS and TV, they felt it would cheapen their brand. They want people to see them because, of course, they were big hits in theaters. They want people to appreciate them in big theaters. But of course, like later on down the line, especially once you had certain big blockbusters like Little Mermaid came out that were big hits right out the gate. And once that came on VHS, it was a big hit. They realized, okay, maybe we need to actually start putting our stuff on VHS soon. Because what they did is that when they started, especially for Studio Ghibli too. Because I think when they started putting their movies on VHS, I think they start with more of their silver age ones. So like Robin Hood, Aristocats, Fox and the Hound. Like they start off with more like movies that did fairly well, but they weren't exactly like the big golden age stuff. Like the golden age ones like Snow White, Bambi, and Peter Pan, they didn't start doing those until probably like say like the 80s. And at that point, like VHS, that was already kind of a big boom in a way too. Because prior to that, you had to see it on TV, and even then, it took a while for them to put it on TV too. Because I think the first movie I think Disney played on TV, I think it was like Alice in Wonderland. I think that was the main one. And then later on the line, they start doing some of their other ones. So let me color this in too. Let me get his other vest. I think I'll color in his suit jacket while I'm at it too. Studio Ghibli, like there's still a whole bunch of other Studio Ghibli films I've yet to see in full. Because I think when it comes to Studio Ghibli, I've seen Spirited Away, I've seen parts of Princess Mononoke. There's one other one which I can't remember. What's another one I've seen that was pretty good? Howl's Moving Castle. That's another good one. I remember seeing that. I'm trying to remember. Did I see Ponyo? I've seen parts of Ponyo because I remember seeing trailers for that when that was out. And I'm trying to remember, I can't remember if he's actually retired, because I remember that was kind of a thing for a while where he said, Hayao Miyazaki, he said he was going to retire. He said he was going to retire after Howl's Castle came out, then he didn't. Then I heard he was going to retire for Ponyo, then he didn't after that. But I can see why they mark his movie, because like his movies have a very distinct look and style to them, because it's a very gentler and more cinematic look. Plus, it makes me more fluid too. I'd say even though technically some probably wouldn't consider it a Miyazaki film, even I consider it one. The Lupin the Third's movie, Cast of Cagliostro, because for those who don't know, like before Miyazaki went on his own and did his own thing, he started out doing a lot of stuff for Lupin the Third series, because he was on the Part 1 series. He was an animator on that show, and also I think he was an animator on Part 2 as well. I think it was more effects animator, but of course he started doing his own thing, because of course he did stuff for he worked on a couple other shows. I know he did stuff for Sherlock, and I think it was Sherlock and Hound. I think that was one. I think he worked on the first half of that show. And there's another one I'm trying to think of it. I can't remember at the same, but it came out around at the same time. But I remember one of the very last things he did before, he fully started to go on his own, do his own stuff. It was Keys Lives Up. I heard that one. Castle Side. I need to hear about that one. I heard that one's good. Spirited Away is the one I'm most familiar with, because I remember that came out around the same time Lilo and Stitch came out. Yeah, because I think it was Chevy Chase, I think that's her name, who voiced Lilo in the movie. She voiced the main character in Spirited Away. In fact, quite a number of Disney voice actors that would do a voicing for Disney, they also do a voice for the dubs in a lot of the Miyazaki movies. But there's still a few of them more I need to check out. I think the older ones I've seen is like there was this one movie he did years ago. It wasn't one he's directed, but it was one he was involved. It was a much older one, and that was kind of like a fantasy type of like anime. But Castle of Cagliostro, that's one of my favorites by him because I've heard some people say when it comes to Lupin films, like that film is more of like say a Miyazaki film rather than a Lupin film because with Miyazaki, he under his direction he kind of really softened up Lupin's character because where in the manga and the part one and the first television series that came out, he's definitely more of a despicable character. He has more of like an ambiguous moral code. But like later on down the line, once he had more of like a bigger like role in directing process, he kind of made more like a Robin Hood like character. And I think for the story they're trying to, I think it really kind of worked, for the type of character story they're trying to tell because the story is very simple, but it has a lot of like heart to it too. And funny enough, it ended up kind of being very influential with Disney even before Disney started distributing it soon. Because I remember the finale in Great Mouse Detective, where Baz and Ragnar are fighting on top of Big Ben. That was very much inspired by the finale in Castle of Cagliostro. Because Lupin, the antagonist, they end up kind of fighting on top of a tower there. Yeah, but it's a pretty fun movie. I think when I last saw it on Netflix. They had it on Netflix for a brief while. I don't know if they have it now, because I didn't see last time I checked. I know when I saw them, they had a version where you could switch between the original Japanese audio, or you could watch the watch a dub version. I think the dub version they had an older version where I think it was Streamline Company's the one that did the dub. Where Bob Bergen, for those who know Bob Bergen, he did he's known for doing a lot of dubs with anime, but nowadays more known for doing stuff with Looney Tunes. I think he does Porky Pig nowadays, but he did Lupin in that one, and he does a pretty good job in that one. And I know later on they did a newer dub not too long ago where Tony Oliver, he's pretty much become like the go-to guy when it comes to dubbing Lupin and all like future stuff now. But I heard that in the Bob Bergen one, I think I can't remember. I think it was some sort of like copyright or localization issue, where I guess like in the movie they couldn't refer to him by the name Lupin, so they either were referring by the Wolf, because that is kind of what the names will go by in some versions of the franchise. And I know, because of course, for those who know Lupin, he also got a partner, Jigen, who's like a sharpshooter. And in that dub, sometimes refer to him as, instead of Lupin, refer to him as Boss, which to me seems a little odd because, for those who know Lupin and Jigen, they kind of saw themselves as equals and as partners and as friends. They really didn't see themselves as like a boss and employee type of deal. As far as I know, in the newer dub, he does just refer to as Lupin. Oh, he's on Apple TV. Okay, I don't know if I have Apple TV. I might have it. I'll have to check that out. That's good to know, though. Thank you. But I'll have to give it a watch because I've seen quite a few of the Lupin movies. Because I've seen that one. I've seen Mystery of Mamo. Now, Mystery of Mamo. Now that one's definitely more of like a Lupin movie because that one kind of caters more towards like Lupin, even the original like manga creators, Monkey Punch's like madcap sense of humor. That one has more like sort of a Lupin film. And there's a lot out there I've seen that I like, because of course there's a lot of different like OVAs and different like films that came out there. Of course, another one I like is the one that came a few years that was more. I think it was called Lupin the First. It was like Lupin the movie. I think that's what it was. And that's the first one where it was in CGI, and that one actually ended up being a really fun movie because, like, even though it was in 3D, like, they captured the style and look of the characters, like, very well. and it captured the feel like the original of the old show. There was that, and there's a few other OVAs from the 90s too. In fact, a lot of them I caught on Pluto TV. In fact, Pluto TV, like that, I think that and Tubi, that's become a really great haven for checking out a lot of like old school like anime. Because I've seen Lupin, I've seen City Hunter, I've seen more obscure ones like Radisumo Red Sun Matsuro, Giant Gorg. That's another really good one. That's like a mecha anime, and a few others too. But yeah, it's kind of my go-to place if I want to see some really good anime. In fact, let me kind of erase the red pencil marks right here, so his fist is a little more prominent. Let me kind of color in his shoes. Yeah, because we'll be pretty much done with this pretty soon. Because I think once I'm done with this, I'll probably head out of here pretty soon enough. Because I know his sandals, they kind of have like a sandy brown look to them. Oh, I realized I forgot to color in his eyes too. Because I know his buttons is yellow, but his eyes are yellow too. Can't we almost forgot that? Glad I remembered that. Alright, cool. Let me get that. Of course, the straps are like a darker shade of brown, so let me get that. In fact, you know, funny enough with like Tubi and Pluto, it kind of becomes like a big underdog when it comes to like streaming service. Like, well, one, they're free, so you don't have to worry about paying for anything. But also, they've been at least I think with Pluto, they've been kind of getting like a larger variety of like older cartoons. Because I know with Tubi they got like a wide variety of like old Popeye cartoons, Looney Tunes stuff, and they're all like been remastered in a really good quality too. In fact, I think between watching old cartoons on Tubi and on Pluto, I'll try to do a Tubi more because they tend to have remastered copies. Pluto TV, sometimes it's a grab bag. Because I know there was one channel I came across where they play a lot of like old cartoons, play like old like public domain cartoons and Looney Tunes cartoons. The only thing about it is that, like, they often got these really old like third generation copies where, you know, like the colors have faded, the audio is really muddled. And worst case scenario, sometimes their versions were the colorized version. So what I mean by that is, like, sometimes, you know how back in the day with old cartoons they were done in black and white. Well, what happened a lot of times in the 60s when they started broadcasting cartoons on TV, you know, once color TV became a thing, what they would do is they would colorize them. But what they would do is that they would outsource these cartoons. I think in places like Korea and other smart places where these smaller studios, they didn't have like a big budget. So what they do is they would hand trace every other frame, not every single frame, every other frame. And so what would happen is that the moves end up being really choppy, and some of the colors they would use, they would be really kind of odd. Like, you know, a character that had like very like black fur, it would appear as brown. Other characters, like if they had very tan skin, it would appear blue. Now, of course, later on down the line, of course, in the 90s, it got a little more streamlined because, of course, once Ted Turner, I think when he started broadcasting, Looney Tunes stuff on Cartoon Network, he was able to get a hold of the cartoons. He was able to have them digitally colorized, so they didn't have to worry about like retracing everything. All they had to do is digitally colorize all the things that are in color. And funny enough, he actually got a little flack for it too because like he wasn't coloring just Looney Tunes. Like he was even kind of like old classic like Casablanca. And in fact, I think I remember one critic. I can't remember if it was a movie critic or it was a director who from an old movie that said this, but they said they basically said, okay, Ted Turner needs to keep his goddamn crayons out of my movies. It was something along that variety, but the point was that not a lot of folks at the time were too keen on colorization. I can understand why, because I think if you're colorizing a movie that wasn't meant to be viewed in black and white, you're kind of like taking away from the experience because you're not viewing it as the way it was intended. unless you do a really good job, sometimes colorized films can tend to look really weird. Like in cartoons, it's fun because everything in cartoons is mainly like flat colors. Whereas, in live action movies where everything has a lot more like 3D dimension, unless you do it digitally, you have to do it where everything looks really monochromatic, everything looks kind of like flat and dull. And sometimes the contrast and lighting can look really odd when everything's been kind of like everything's been colored in. So it depends on how the process is done too. Because colorizing like films, that's kind of been an old thing. Because I know that's actually been a thing that's been around as long as film has been around. Because there have been some films like from even back in the early 1900s that were colorized, where basically some filmmakers, they would take the original negatives, but they make a copy of it, and they would physically color them over them with like a paint or dye or something. I forgot how they did it. And there's probably more ways out there, because the only thing about with those old like silent films is that a lot of those have been lost to time, because like some had to be melted down like for the war effort, because some be melted down like to use. Some have been burnt down in fire, because it's really flammable stuff too. Yeah, it looks pretty good. I think I'm looking like this. So now I'm gonna add a couple of bit more finishing touches. Ooh, excuse me, sorry. Excuse me. So before I go, let me just kind of like fine tune our back. Let me just kind of like thicken up the outlines a bit more. Kind of thicker on his tail. That's kind of what give it a nice thick outline. Oh wow, I didn't realize I was at the hour long mark. Okay, that's perfect. Maybe kind of thicken up the outline around his fist. And funny with show like Rescue Rangers, I think when I first saw the weirdly Rescue Rangers, like I remember seeing it on TV back when it was out, but I mainly call it reruns because of course for me the show had already been out by when I was born. So a lot of these older shows like Rescue Rangers, like DuckTales and Gummy Bears, you could only see them on reruns. And when I kind of started watching these shows, I kind of caught on in during the period where they were kind of being slowly phased out from TV. Because I remember I used to watch like Toon Disney, and usually like, they would play like a lot of these older shows probably like in the morning on weekdays. And that would be the only times I would see them, because of course they weren't on Disney Channel, at least not anymore by the time I was watching Disney Channel. But they were on like Toon Disney, and of course once Toon became like Disney XD, you hardly saw them at all. So a lot of times when I would watch, I would catch them on YouTube, like at least before YouTube really started cracking down on copyright. Because I remember there was a brief period where you could catch like whole series on YouTube. And granted, you still sort of can now. Of course, now you gotta catch on YouTube TV now though, and you gotta pay a fee. But I remember it was that period where you have these whole series and cartoon series that have been uploaded by certain folks on there. But then of course, once YouTube up, they started really cracking down on that. Let me kind of take an outline on his other side here too. Let me kind of thicken his irises a bit. Yeah, but I've been meaning to kind of do a character with just these two for a long time. Mainly like these from Disney Afternoon, these were two of my favorite characters. And it's funny, even though they're voiced by the same voice actor, they both have very different like personalities too. Pete, he's very like gruff, he's very rambunctious, and he's very front load. Where he's more scheming, he's more conniving. P can be conniving too, but like not as often as he can be. Let me get, around his shoulder too. Let me get around the side of his face. Let me get around his little snout. And see, I'm glad I did a sketch early on beforehand, because there was a brief period earlier this month I thought I was going to have time to do it. The only thing about it, though, is that since I knew I had to leave pretty soon, I wasn't sure when exactly I would have to kind of leave right away. Because I didn't want... Because the thing is, I didn't want to have a situation where I would get started and have to kind of cut it short and probably finish up the year later tomorrow. I didn't want to. I kind of want to do kind of like a one-and-done type of deal. Because I thought about maybe doing it for tomorrow, but I knew I was going to be a little bit busier tomorrow. So I figured, let me make sure I get it today when I know I have the time. And luckily I do. Let me kind of go on his sandals a bit more. Let me kind of shadow underneath. Shade underneath, his feet. All right, that looks good. Let me kind of round out his pupils a bit more too. Kind of get underneath the bottom of his muzzle here too. And okay, I think we're just about done now. The only thing I need to do, well, of course, let me add my little signature. And also, let me add today's day. Where's that pen I had? Where is it? Here we go, perfect. Today is day 11. Hang on for just one moment. And today's prompt word was fat cats. And trust me, I'm not really body shaming. That's literally what they are. Alright guys, I really appreciate you guys actually dropping it. Hey, shit, I'm glad you liked it. And as always, guys, I really appreciate you guys really dropping in for today's stream. I'm aware it's a little later than I normally do streaming, but I'm glad you guys were able to drop in anyway. And so I'll let you guys know when I actually do my next stream. And until then, guys, hope you guys have a great night, have a great weekend. See you guys next time.